and audio, right?
It is. We're live. Hey, everybody.
Excellent.
Welcome. Welcome to On the Edge. I'm missing my cohort today. Bennett Sung had a work emergency this morning and that he's dealing with. So he's not going to be able to join us here on the Edge. Maybe he can join us by the end of the show, hopefully. But I have a special guest today. Thank you so much for joining me, Kevin Jackson, who is the president and CEO of the June 19th Museum in Galveston, Texas. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. But first, Kevin, I want you to tell me hello. Thank you for joining me. I was talking too much there. So please.
No, thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be with you.
I'm so happy. I think you and I met in the summer, just this past summer.
Yeah.
And I felt an instant gratitude for you because I knew that you were going to be somebody in my life that I could learn and unlearn from, which we'll be talking more about unlearning later. But why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Well, first of all, I agree with you. I felt a kinship with you immediately when we got together in Florida. But as far as myself, yeah, I am currently the president of June 19th Museum Incorporated. We are hoping to actually launch June 19th Museum down in Galveston. I'll tell you more about that.
Good.
I was in the military for a while. I retired in '94. I was a carrier pilot. Also worked in the Navy Space Technology Program.
Wow.
After that, transitioned into the civilian world, as they say, as an executive. Did a lot of work with the U.S. intelligence community, with NASA. I think we talked about the fact that I worked on the New Horizons spacecraft that went to Pluto doing payload processing. Wow. Did a lot of, we developed a payload processing system for a space shuttle and space station payloads. Worked with JP Morgan Chase, is big in IT, IBM, worldwide executive IBM. Got into cloud computing very early. Actually was part of the team that deployed the cloud for the U.S. intelligence community.
Wow.
And started my own company, GC GlobalNet, in 2013, helping commercial organizations leverage cloud computing and develop new business models. And that's sort of what I did. Actually do a lot in social media as well. I have my own podcast, Digital Transformers, focusing on digital transformation. And I got wrapped up with the Juneteenth Museum about 2 years ago.
Wow. What a story you have. I feel like I need to ask, what haven't you done? I think is a more appropriate question. You have such a wide variety of background, work experiences, and you and I kind of connected also on talking about Devotion, the film that was released earlier about what a great film. And if our audience watchers haven't seen it, please go look up Devotion. It's just an amazing film. I think I saw it on Amazon Prime, I think.
Yeah. I saw that also. And I haven't talked to you, but I got an invitation to go to a special screening of Devotion up in Massachusetts at the Andover Academy, and that's where Captain Tom Hudner actually went to school. And the story of Devotion is two Korean War pilots, Navy pilots, were flying. Tom Hudner and Ensign Jesse Brown. Hudner's white and Jesse is black. And in the 50s, that was a big thing. And Jesse was one of the first naval aviators, African American naval aviators. I'm not going to spoil it, but Jesse actually crashed in Korea, and Tom Hudner really showed his devotion
He really did.
in supporting his wingman.
It
So
just gave me
you
the
need
chills
to see them.
when you just said that line because it's such a powerful movie and for so many reasons. The
Hmm.
relationship, the kind of coming of age for both of these young men, and
Yeah,
being the age that I am now, they were so young. They were so young. I mean, you were so young when you were in the military. I mean, just
yeah.
it's such
I saw myself in. I mean, Hudner went to the Naval Academy. I graduated from the Naval Academy, right?
okay.
And
Yeah,
even in the 70s and the 80s, when I got my wings, there were still relatively few African Americans flying on and off aircraft carriers. So, yeah.
there were some tense moments in that in the film. For sure, some very tense I really encourage everybody to watch it. It was one of those films that was part of I created this package of books,
Mm,
of podcasts, of movies, that I needed uh, to use, to read, to absorb, to learn from and unlearn from. So,
yeah.
um,
Well, as I was saying, so I got invited to a special screening of Devotion at the end of March up in Andover, Massachusetts. And I'm going to have the opportunity to actually meet the families of Captain Tom Hudner and Ensign Jesse Brown. They've both passed, but
that's amazing.
I can't wait.
Oh my gosh. And I can't wait to talk to you after this because I think it's going to be such an amazing experience for you. I can't wait. So
Yeah.
thank you, Kevin, for being here today. We've got a lot to not a lot to cover, but a few things that I want to talk about. First, we've learned a little bit about you and your service, and thank you very much for your service. Why did you join the military?
Why?
Yeah,
I
why?
was a kid of the 60s. I wanted to be an astronaut.
That's amazing.
And to be honest, that's really why. And I was a geek when I grew up, and I'd read a lot. And I since I wanted to be an astronaut, I wanted to figure out what did it take to become an astronaut. So every book that I read said that you had to be a military pilot, and you had to be an aerospace engineer, and you had to go to flight test school,
Wow,
and then you you would be picked, and then you'd become an astronaut. It
wow.
was that simple, right? Um, Nothing's ever that simple, obviously, but that was the model of the Mercury 7, right?
Right, right.
When they first created astronauts. So I set upon that goal for my life. That was the path of my life. I was going to be good, and you had to be good in math, make
I was
great
just gonna say, you
grades.
had to be good in math. I know that. So
Had to be good in math and science, make great grades. So I focused in school, and I was really good in math and science. I actually went to did real well in my college entrance exams, which I guess don't really matter anymore.
right, right.
I'm aging myself. Got gotten a got an appointment to the Naval Academy. I had to decide, I need to be the best pilot, best jet pilot, right? So it was Air Force Navy. I said, well, if you're going to be the best pilot, it's got to be a Navy pilot, because who else could land on aircraft carriers? Can't
Right,
be an Air Force
right,
pilot.
right. Like,
So,
if you
so
can
I,
land on a carrier, maybe you could land on the moon, right?
yeah, right, exactly. So that's what I did, and I got an appointment to Annapolis. I did well in Annapolis, majored in aerospace engineering because that's what you needed to do.
Wow.
I got my bachelor's, and I had grades good enough to be selected for aviation. Went to I did good in primary. I did good enough to get selected for Jets actually, and so I was down in Kingsville, Texas, and flying jets. That's a whole nother story, but that's why I went in the military, to become an astronaut. And like I said, that's a long story we're not going to cover. I actually did apply to become a space shuttle mission specialist, but
Wow.
I um, I was disqualified because of high blood pressure.
Oh, darn it.
Yeah.
It's
So
'cause you're a dad too, right? That's why the high blood pressure. That's where it comes from, but oh,
yeah.
well, and what an amazing story, and, um, I hope that, your work makes you feel like you are exploring wild frontiers and, you just benefiting everybody with what you're doing now. So let's talk about that. Let's talk
Okay.
about the June 19th museum. What an amazing thing. I know that it's at Custom House. I know there's history there. So please give us the rundown of the June 19th museum and what we can expect.
Yeah, sure. So it's kind of turned into kind of a passion project for me. Um, and, sometimes when you look back on your life, or at least me, I don't know about others, but you see certain things, and at the time you didn't know what they meant, or it was just sort of fate, you're living your life. And that's how this Juneteenth Museum sort of turned out to me. When I left the military, I one of my first jobs, actually, was my second job when I left the military, was as the chief technology officer for a company called Centel Corporation in Alexandria, Virginia. And the CEO there, his name was Jim Garrett. Uh, 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 a black gentleman, an entrepreneur, and he had founded and built Centel into an $80 million corporation. He
Wow.
had multiple contracts with the U.S. Navy and the government around spectrum management, and it was also had projects with NASA as well. So it really he sort of mentored me as I was transitioning from the military into the commercial world. And Centel was sort of an incubator of sorts for entrepreneurs, both black and white entrepreneurs. And Jim Garrett was actually an angel investor in my very first commercial venture called Zocom, where we were doing uh, wearable computers.
Oh,
it,
wow.
I tell you, you look back on the technology of that day. This was the early '90s, and
Wow.
these were bulky things you wore on your belt, and you had this thing that goes on your head.
Oh my
You looked like
gosh.
a cyborg, but it was a little eyepiece.
Oh my gosh.
But we'd actually had used these wearable computers for the project. That was where I did the Epic project, where we were using wearable computers, wireless technology, and to do electronic signatures for payload processing on the space shuttle and space shuttle payloads and space station payloads. Um, so he had also invested in another company called EIM Sensors. And that company was started by Mark Judson. Now, now think about this. So Mark was a white Mormon from Utah.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm familiar.
Okay, this is going to become interesting as we move forward. And
Yeah.
this was in 96, 97. Okay. So fast forward to 2021. And I hadn't met Mark. right? I hadn't even heard of him, all right? But we were connected by Jim Garrett. So in 2021, Mark was at home over the summer, and he was at a family cookout, and his brother named Paul worked for this company called DSW Homes in Galveston, Texas. So they were just basically, talking, and Paul said, "Hey, Mark." They were listening. They were listening to the news or something, and they
Right.
were talking on the news about how President Biden had just signed into law Juneteenth as the National Independence Day, that created June 19th as a national holiday,
Right.
and it's celebrated because it was the when all slave well colloquially is when all the slaves were
Right.
freed at the end
All of
of
them.
the
Or they
yeah,
found out. They knew. They learned.
yeah, that they knew. um so Paul, who worked for DSW Homes, like I said, "Hey, Mark, did you know that the headquarters of our company is in the old Galveston Customs and Courthouse?" And he said, "Well, no." So he said, "Well, that's the birthplace. That's like the traditional birthplace of Juneteenth,
Wow.
because uh, during the Battle of Galveston, when Galveston was captured by Union forces, General Gordon Granger, who commanded the headquarters district of Texas, issued General Order Number 3, which was in essence just a restatement of President Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation that was issued years earlier. But, you know, being in Galveston, Texas, in the deep South, and being a slave who it was against the law to even be able to read, they
Right.
didn't know anything about the Emancipation Proclamation. So this General Order Number 3 basically told all of the slaves that you are all free. Um, and this was on June 19th.
Okay.
And that was the origination of the holiday. So, and Paul went on to tell his brother that DSW Homes wanted to move to another location. So they were going to be selling the building. So Mark said, "Wow, that would make a great Juneteenth museum."
That's incredible.
so he started working towards trying to raise money, and he went back to his mentor, Jim Garrett. And Jim said, "Hey, Mark, you want to do a Juneteenth museum? Did you look in the mirror lately? You're white and you're Mormon.
You're right. Right. You
You
can't get
need
more
somebody to help you."
yeah, you need somebody to help you for sure.
so Jim picked up the phone and called me. He said, "Kevin, you need to talk to Mark and you need to help him out."
Well,
so
thank goodness he had you to call.
so that that was the first time I met Mark, and that's when we started working together to try to raise money and to acquire the Galveston Custom and Courthouse to be a museum. So that's how it started.
And that you answered my question about why is it in Galveston? I don't know that a lot of
Yeah.
people knew about Custom House, the Custom House.
hmm
Is it the Custom House or Custom House?
it's the old Galveston Custom House, Customs and Courthouse.
Customs and Court. And it just got
Yeah.
shortened to Custom House
Yeah,
somewhere
it just got
along
sort
the
of
way.
shortened.
And I've had the opportunity to cruise through the website. I encourage everybody to do that. It is just a gorgeous building. And I know that there's going to be some unique things about this museum. Can you share that with us?
Yeah, and just a little note was kind of so Mark and I started working together, and but I didn't know at the time that he actually was dying of cancer, and he didn't want anyone else to know. So after he started, got sick, sort of at the end of 2021, and he passed, and his family wanted to continue the activities. So that's how I became the president of June 19th Museum.
Wow.
And yes, we wanted to create an experiential museum so that people can actually um, understand what slavery was, how relate slavery in the 1800s to modern slavery, what's happening today, understand its effect on not just American society, but on global society. And we wanted to leverage advanced technology like virtual reality, augmented reality, in order to actually create experiences, because people really retain knowledge that they gain through life's experiences. So it's not going to be your traditional go look at a painting on the wall or see an
Right,
artifact that
right.
you can't touch, right? We want people to be able to interact with the environment in the 1800s, 1700s, all the way to modern slavery. And that's why we have actually partnered with Hope for Justice, that has a similar mission to eliminate modern slavery.
Great. And the URL for the museum is june19museum.org.
Yes.
Okay. I'm going
Well,
to write
actually, it's
that.
.com. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's .com.
Yeah, june19museum.com.
There we go.
We are a it's a blend between a profit and a nonprofit. One of the biggest issues with things like museums that are nonprofit is that they don't have a continuing revenue stream, uh, and they're always begging for
Always
money.
begging for money. Yep.
So our motto is actually to create um, educational content that could be used by corporations and by schools in order to teach people about racism, the history of slavery, and how it affects society, and to make people more aware of, and now we're going to talk about things later in this broadcast, so they can maybe unlearn things that they learned previously.
Right. And that has been my quest for 15 years now. It's been
Mm.
quite a journey for me. I was a white Mormon, not living in Utah, but I grew up in a white Mormon family, and there was a lot I'd never learned. And then
Mm.
there was a lot that I learned that was incorrect, and that I came to a place in my life where I realized, wow, I really don't know anything about this. What I thought I knew
Mhm.
is either not true or not the full truth, not the full story. And so I wanted to ask you about unlearning.
Uh-huh.
It's been this process for me. It's been a very purposeful process for me to unlearn the things that I was taught, the things that I came to know or believed throughout my
Right.
life, either through religion or school or family, parents, parents teaching you, friends telling you things that each of us has a different perspective of life because of all these different influences. None of us have the same
Mhm.
influences in our life that help us become who we are. So, it's been a purposeful goal, purposeful intent for me to unlearn. And when you saw that, when I wrote unlearn, hey, we're going to talk about unlearning. What did what did you think? What did you think about that?
Google, help me. No.
Oh, good. Well, that's good. That means maybe I'm teaching you something because I've learned so much from you. I feel guilty just being the taker all the time. I'm just going to take
No, no,
from
no.
you. So
That was that was great, and the term sort of threw me for a loop, right? So I did go to Google, and it said it's the process of um, it's how do you forget things that you learned before, and it gave an example about when we grew up. Most of us my age, when we grew up, we learned that Pluto was a planet, right?
right,
And
right.
then and then year later, when we're an adult, they decide that it's no longer a planet and they demote Pluto, right?
And
And we had to unlearn
that was
that.
a hard thing. That was a really hard thing to accept. Those of us that grew up watching the landing on the moon. I mean, I remember
Yeah.
watching the landing on the moon on a big TV that was rolled into my classroom. It was black and white. It was not a great picture, right? But as kids, we stood around that TV and were so excited to see that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and Pluto was part of our learning. So to have
Yeah.
that
Pluto was
removed
part of your learning, right? And then they're
was
saying, you know, so it's sort of like at the time, Pluto was a planet. So it wasn't that your teacher was lying to you, it's that society writ large decided that they would change the definition of what a planet was. So
interesting.
when they changed the definition, poor Pluto was no longer a planet.
Right. I've seen these shirts that say RIP Pluto, or I still remember Pluto, and it's
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so it's an
So
interesting concept.
yeah,
And
so it's not necessary. So I don't know if it. So when I heard unlearn, it gives such a negative connotation. It's like saying somebody told you, and you
right,
actually said it. Somebody told you a lie, and now you have to forget that lie.
right.
Well, that's not necessarily true because the truth changes. And that's the first, I think that's probably the first lie, is that truth is static. Truth is not static.
Truth is
That's a
not static.
fallacy. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a
The
fallacy
the
because
only
our world changes.
like I likened it to that phrase about change. The only thing that doesn't change is that change happens.
Yeah.
The only truth is that change is real. And we've heard those mantras, change or die.
Mhm.
You need to be constantly learning and forgetting things that you thought you knew, or things that were part of your belief system. I haven't thought about it as forgetting. I kind of, because for me, part of that unlearning process is to realize how people learn and understand that everybody learns a little bit differently. And they're certainly learning from different people, different forces, different ideas, different religions, different.
Yeah.
So forgetting to me is, I don't know that that's something that can totally be accomplished, right? Because
And it
like you
shouldn't.
said, the truth is n not static. It
Right.
changes.
And yeah.
So
And it shouldn't be forgotten. So I didn't look this up in Google, but I sort of came up with a sort of a vision of my own. What do I think about unlearning? And I believe it's the process of dealing with constant and accelerating change across all aspects of our lives. It is really a new skill that we all have to build because it's needed in order to assimilate the huge amounts of information and data that we get exposed to in today's modern life. This is new, okay?
It's new.
In the
It is new.
past, it's
It's
new.
exciting. It's exciting,
Yeah, it's very exciting.
right? And
Um,
being
yeah.
curious, staying curious enough to know that you don't know everything. You don't know
Mhm.
everything. And it can be exciting and wonderful to, well, it is wonderful to learn and then recognize that truth is not that just that flat earth. It's not a,
Right.
it's constantly changing. Like exactly what I just said. We didn't know that the earth was round, and and then all of a sudden we did. All of a sudden we learned, well, some of us know that it's round.
Some of us know, some
Sphere,
of us think it's still flat.
yeah, some of us think that it's not a sphere. So
Yeah. And the
so
thing about it is that I believe that it is a process, right? But the first step to unlearning is really acceptance that there is change, that change happens. Society changes the truth constantly, and we
right.
have to accept that as a reality. The second is to find these sources of learning and relearning, and you have to be open to the fact that change happens. Okay. And then the third part is really being open to new experiences and knowledge. You have to accept change because this is what creates the new potential and new possibility. It really enhances uh, the brain. Okay. It helps the brain to grow and to change regardless of age. And age has become an important thing to me
Me
recently.
too. Me
As
too.
so unlearning really builds greater adaptability and flexibility. It's the key to innovation because the old ways rarely
That's true.
produce new results.
I, that's for sure. That's for sure. And recognizing challenge, whether it's you being challenged or somebody
Mhm.
else that's being challenged, also gives you that opportunity to say, okay, what is that challenge about? Do I know about it? Could I learn from it? I think it's so important for us to just stay in that, like you mentioned, that agile state of
Yeah,
I am smart enough to know that I'm not smart, so smart that I know everything, right? I know that I don't know
right.
everything. And it's such a great place to be. It is very exciting. I loved going to school. I loved learning. It also
Mhm.
became hard because there were things that you had the regimented part of learning, and this feels like it is exploring the final frontier for me. I'm at a place in my life where
Oh,
I'm in
yeah.
the probably the last third of my life, and it is wide open. And how exciting is that to know that I have this the rest of my life to keep learning, right? So I appreciate you being part of my curriculum. It's been wonderful to learn from you. Let's talk a
Thank you,
little
Sensei Rayanne.
bit. Let's thank you. I want to talk a little bit about anti-racism.
Mhm.
Um, how can we can be purposeful in that, and also the value of having an event like Black History Month and celebrating it. So, first of all, how do you feel about Black History Month? I have a lot of African American Black friends who are kind of struggle with it because they think it feels like it's limited to 1 month of thinking about Black history. And one thing that I've really enjoyed adding to my vocabulary is Black history is our history. It's
Yeah.
everyone's history. Black history is everyone's history. So tell me your thoughts about Black History Month and its importance.
So, Black History Month's been around for a while, right? And it was just sort of something that was there in the background to me for the long time. Yeah, it's February, it's Black History Month. Until it was my first cruise in the Navy. So, I was an adult. I was flying on aircraft carriers, and it happened to be February. Uh, and it was like I was the only black person in the wardroom, and this is where the officers in our squadron, right? I was the only black pilot. I was one of two black pilots in the entire air wing on the carrier. Um, and you know, uh, one of the HR people came to me and said, "Hey, we want to do something for Black History Month." And I sort of thought about it, and it, it, it was kind of weird,
Yeah.
But as I said, then it became sort of like first it seemed to be an obligation. No, why they got to come to the black guy for Black History Month?
Right. Right.
Nobody else knows about Black history except the black guy.
Right. Right.
but but then it became an opportunity, and it became a sense of pride, and I this was in the mid '80s. Okay, so as I told you, I was a geek way back, right? So I had one of the very early laptops and a dot matrix printer.
That was this thick.
Yeah, right. And I actually uh, sort of uh, did some research, and I created pamphlets about leading black inventors,
Oh,
uh, and I created them with my dot matrix printer. And distributed them across the aircraft carrier. And it was, all of the comments were just so uh, reaffirming. It's sort of like, you know, I didn't know that,
I didn't
or
know
wow,
that.
that was really interesting, and maybe it was the very first unlearning point in many people's lives.
For sure.
Um,
And you were
so
part of that. I mean, it's so much there's so much
yeah,
value in someone like you stepping away, and someone like you, I mean, by someone who is smart, brilliant, has this amazing experience, but stepping away from that and saying, "I can help," right?
yeah.
Stepping away from the, "Oh, you come to the black guy," and then get up and saying, I can help. I can change somebody else's perception of
Yeah,
history, somebody
right.
else's perception of life, life here in the US, life everywhere around the world. So, um,
Yeah, and that was sort of, I mean, and I guess uh, the June 19th Museum was sort of a similar thing, in that you go to school and you learn about Emancipation Proclamation, and that they say that Lincoln freed all the slaves, and then later you learn that, well,
I
no, he didn't free all the slaves. He only freed the slaves in the rebellious states. All of the northern states were still freed. I have slaves. There were states in the north that didn't succeed, that were slave states,
yeah,
right? So all those slaves weren't freed. And the fact that Lincoln really didn't care about slavery
the issue,
per
yeah.
se.
It was about
He
keeping
only
the
wanted to
union,
save the Union,
save the
right?
union.
He
That's
didn't,
right.
yeah,
And you
he
can't
didn't
convince
care.
anybody of that. Well, you can't convince some people. I know that. I learned that in school.
Uh-huh.
In high school, I learned that. But the majority of people believe that Lincoln freed the slaves, that was the purpose of.
Right. And it wasn't. And the other thing is that people say, Well, as soon as he did the Emancipation Proclamation, why didn't all the slaves just leave the fields and the plantations?
They
Well,
didn't
first
know.
of all, do you think
Mhm.
anybody told the
Yeah,
slaves
they're not gonna tell them,
that they were
right?
free? Did you think the master was going to come down to the plantation and say, "Hey, you're all free, go away"? No,
Right,
of course not,
right,
right? And so it was just so weird to even think about that, and the context is so different in our lives looking
right,
back on that time frame.
right,
So yeah, I think it's really important to understand the context. And earlier you said you wanted to try to forget some things that you learned that were wrong, and
right.
that's why I say don't forget it.
Don't
The
forget it.
context is important.
Right,
Okay.
right.
Use that as context for what you relearn.
And you know what? It needs to be, as we are unlearning, it needs to be uncomfortable, right? It needs to be, it's not going to be peaches and cream for people
Yeah.
who have this hard and set idea of history, of racism, of whiteness, of
Right.
blackness, right? It needs to be uncomfortable. I've had several instances where I felt really uncomfortable. I don't know if you've watched the movie. I talked about this last week on The Edge, but the movie called You People on
Mhm.
Netflix.
Oh, yes. That's an awesome movie. I
An
enjoyed
amazing
that.
film, and I had so many moments of discomfort, and it was because I saw myself in the Julia Louis-Dreyfus character.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
saw
Yeah.
her being how she was just being over the top, "Tell me about your hair, and what is that style called?" And I thought, "Oh, she's like me." And then
I said, I've done
discomfort, right?
that.
The Amira, the character Amira, when she would
Yep.
come back and say, "I'm really uncomfortable with how you are talking to me about this. You don't understand what this is doing. I know you think you're doing the right thing, but you're not." And so
Yeah.
it was like a mirror in my face to be, okay, stop centering yourself, right? We do this.
Center yourself on the differences.
Right, right. Yes, that's a great point. Center yourself on the differences. I love that. That's a great way to think about it because I can't put myself in your shoes. I can't. Just
Yeah.
like you can't put yourself in my shoes, and it's not about me. Everything is not about me learning, and that's the hard part for me is to know, sit back and listen. You don't need to be talking the whole time. Just sit back and listen.
Yeah,
Of
it's also important to focus on the commonalities because there's so many more commonalities than there are
course.
differences.
As you and I have discovered for sure, and we
Yeah,
couldn't be more different. I mean, I hate math. We couldn't have been more different.
I love math. No.
I know you do. I know you do. So let's talk about this. What if somebody like me came to you and we're friends and I said to you, "Hey, Kevin, tell me how to be an anti-racist." What would you tell me?
um, I would say focus on the commonality of people, and then racism doesn't exist. You focus on the value of the relationship, then there's no room for racism. And then actually, by focusing on the value of a relationship, you will automatically take actions to protect it. Um, and that builds real camaraderie, and it builds a culture that repels things like racism and anti-blackness.
And when you have those that understanding of the commonalities, there is just a beautiful revelation and the sloughing away of the
Yeah,
differences, right? And then there is that love, the humanity, the charitable act of helping one another, right? That kind of takes over. It
yep.
becomes the purpose behind the relationship. Uh, and if you, and it's hard for me when I hear people who have really strict Christian values or are very religious,
Mhm.
and they are not utilizing the love that was taught by their Lord and Savior, Jesus, right? So it's, how can we get past that? How can help me get past that? Because Kevin, you are always so loving and willing. Like when I asked you about the show, you didn't say, "Oh, you came to the black guy," to come and be on the edge. You're so willing to share with such grace about your life, about your story, that helps people like me to continue to unlearn and grow as a human being.
Yeah. And I think that's the most important aspect. Recognize people as the individual that they are, and the value that they can deliver to your life. And if and some of these things we have to unlearn. For instance, you'd mentioned the Christian faith. I mean, the Christian faith actually violates many of the things that in the past they violated many of the things that we would consider um, you know truth today,
Right.
right? Because the truth then was one thing and the truth now is something else. The Christian church supported slavery. The Christian church was for white people, not they had to save all of the black people from themselves, right?
Right. Right. And the area that I live in an area of California where the first California mission
Hmm.
resides, right? And when you really, and at first you think, oh, it's great, they came and saved the savages,
Yeah, they
right?
saved the savages
They
by
saved the savages,
deleting their culture.
exactly, and turning them into slaves. They
Yeah,
built
turning them in.
churches,
Yeah,
they built the churches, they built the cities, and they were, and
it was genocide.
it was, and the church had power to do that.
Yeah.
And I have a book, it's right here, called Capistrano Nights, and it's written by, like in the early 1900s,
Uh-huh.
by one of the priests there at the mission. And it starts off with, "We were lucky enough to conquer these savages." And this was in,
Right.
like 1910, 1902, 19, when this book was written, right? And it's crazy to me that that took place, that it was, we know who the savages were, and it was not the indigenous
But
people,
indigenous people,
right?
right?
Right. So it's just interesting what we unlearn. What we
Yeah.
thought we knew is not necessarily, or is no longer true, right? As you have taught me, I have unlearned that it isn't just necessarily black and white, truth
Right.
and lie.
And that's the other reason why you can't forget it, right? Those who
Right.
forget the past are condemned to repeat
Them
it.
to repeat it. That is very true. Wow. No truer words right now. So let's talk about, so one of the campaigns that I did last year for Black History Month was I talked to a
Yeah.
lot of different Black professionals that were either in sales or marketing and healthcare and HR. And I asked them, what do you want CEOs to know moving forward in regards to racism and DEI efforts within their organizations? So I want to ask you that question. And then the question that Bennett and I came up with this year is very simple. How can we support those efforts? How can we support you? So
Yeah.
first, I'm going to ask you that question about, what would you want CEOs or senior leaders, executives to know about DEI today?
So once again, DEI is all about establishing a culture that recognizes the value of individuals for what they can contribute to the goal of the organization. And it doesn't matter if it's a commercial organization, private organization, public organization. Every organization has its own goals, and in individuals, you need individuals and their skills to accomplish their goals. Don't don't cover up those skills and those capabilities behind the facade of they're different than me and I have to cuddle them. And because they are something else, they can, for some reason, can't deliver any type of value. So, diversity, equity, and inclusion is about recognizing the value of the individual, and that it's important that everyone is different. That's a culture that has to be built.
And do you think everyone is? Do you think? I mean, one thing that I struggle with is the performative actions that aren't
Yeah.
actions, right? It's just like, let's change the logo. Let's post one post and on February 1st, right? Let's right. So
Yeah.
how do we encourage organizations that it needs to be deeper than that? And I mean, and this is a really hard time because one of the first departments that's being eliminated today is DEI efforts,
Mhm.
and that it's just astounding to me that that's happening. So what can we do to prevent this? What can we do to just ensure that DEI remains at the forefront and that it is not performative?
So one of the things we talked about the fact that truth is not static. Truth
Right,
changes,
right,
right? And truth doesn't always change in a good way. Sometimes truth changes in a bad way. And I say that because I'm going to talk about critical race theory, CRT, right? And the big push to get to quote, stop CRT from being taught in our schools.
right,
Okay. It isn't being taught in schools. It never was taught in
right,
schools.
right.
But
Exactly.
but the quote truth today is being pushed is that it is being taught and we have to stop it. Okay. Um, and the fact that some people believe in that truth, that may be one reason why there's an some people may see an equivalence between teaching critical race theory in schools and having DEI programs in companies.
Hmm.
All right, which is a false equivalency,
Right,
but once again, it could be a egregious
right,
thought
right.
or belief. Okay, so
I never even
it
thought
comes.
about
I
that.
guess it comes back again to unlearning. You have to be open to all types of information so that you can understand the difference and
Right.
have critical thought, hopefully, about that.
So, if I said to you, I mean, I've learned so much from you already, but if I said, how can I, a white girl in Southern California, support these efforts? How can I support you? My dog is
Well,
barking outside the door, so if you can hear that, I'm sorry.
and I guess the number one way is to be open. Right, be open to change. Be open to information.
Right.
Um, be willing to accept something that goes against what you have been taught in the past. As long as there's a willingness to talk, discuss, to understand the position or the views from all angles, then that's the only thing I can ask. And if you can build a culture of understanding and not necessarily accepting the viewpoint of all others, but understanding the viewpoint of all others vis-a-vis your own viewpoint and accepting the fact that just because it's different doesn't make it wrong. That's the path towards uh, a more inclusive environment, more inclusive and diverse culture.
Right. I so appreciate you sharing that and coming on the show with me today and talking about all of this. If
No,
somebody
thank
wants
you.
to learn more about the museum, is the best
Mhm.
way for them to visit the website? Do you have I know that
Yes, go to,
when is the grand opening going
yeah.
to be? I know the hope was for
So we're
June
still
9th.
working on that. I would go to June19museum.com, and we'll be providing all the information as it's available.
Okay, great. And keep up the amazing work. Do you have any last thoughts? If people want to get in touch with you, if they want to connect with you, what's the best way to do that?
Oh, okay. Probably the best way is LinkedIn. I'm
Okay.
Kevin L. Jackson on LinkedIn, or on Twitter, Kevin_Jackson to be the best way. Or on my video podcast, Digital Transformers.
I will check out the podcast for sure, and we'll put the link here underneath. It's available on all streaming
Thank you.
services, or
Yes, it is.
okay. And one last thought, Kevin. Just
Uh-huh.
thank you for being so open with your own experiences and for being my friend and
No,
helping
thank you.
me to unlearn, continue to unlearn. That's my quest. Will be for as long as it takes, and it's going to take the rest of my life. So, right?
That's all of us.
That's
Yes. So
all of us.
thank you very much, Rayanne. I really enjoyed my sensei.
Oh, you're so kind. I can't wait till the museum opens. I am going to make a special trip to Galveston to visit, and we'll document that visit. And I
We
can't wait to
do.
learn more. Let me know if there's anything
I
that we can
will.
do. And I'm sure that is there a way to donate to the museum?
Yes, you go to the website. You can click away.
Great, great. Thanks again, Kevin. Thanks, everybody. We'll be back
Thank you.
next week, next Friday, for our next episode of On the Edge, and hopefully Bennett will be here then. Take care. Have a great weekend.